Before starting the paper map, it's important to understand the character behavior and metrics. You need to know exactly what is the jump length and height, what is the size of the character, what is gonna be some extra skills like double jump, the movement forward when attacking, the air movement, etc. Doing this now will be very helpful to save time and create a precise level. The best way to measure this is going to an empty scene in ProBuilder, create like a big swimming pool with ProBuilder. Make sure to keep the 1 meter texture proportionally every time you extrude or resize, and start measuring the character behaviors. Actually, there is a scene in the project that has this swimming pool already built, so you can use it and play with it to get your character metrics. After getting your character metrics, all the main ideas, mechanics, and objectives, we can start drawing our paper map. The classic way to do this is with paper and pencil, but I did mine in Photoshop. I personally believe that doing the map in digital format is better for several reasons. First, it's already digitalized, that is, you're gonna be doing that anyway. It's easy to iterate, it's cleaner, it's easy to access to some very useful tools that the program has. And finally, my favorite is the layers. It's super useful to have layers to organize your map better. I have a lines base layer, a main path layer, a height layers, interactive object layer, puzzle solving layer, trigger layers, comment layers, and all those. If I put all those together, the map it's gonna be a mess. So yeah, keep that in mind because it will save you a lot of work. But regardless the format you choose to use, you probably will start with a blank page. This is for me the most difficult part. White, it's intimidating. So where do I start? Sadly, there isn't a perfect way of doing this. It's completely personal. But in my case, I started by the macro concept of the level. This can be done in a separate sheet or different layer in Photoshop, and the idea is to get some freestyle concept and sketches to set hands free and to give shape to those abstract ideas in your head. For me, this macro concept was a mix of many games that were around my head when I was drawing, like Deku Tree in Zelda Ocarina of Time, The Grove in Guild Wars 2, The Great Hollow in Dark Souls, Teldrassi of World of Warcraft, and a lot of influence from Ori and the Blind Forest. But even if this is a freestyle step, you should keep in mind that your main goal is to creating a fun gameplay. It shouldn't be abstract anymore. Actually, that's why we did the character metrics before. We need to think in a game space now. Now, with those concepts and sketches, it's time to start drawing the actual map for the level. For me, it was very helpful to start adding a grid to the background, or if you are drawing in paper, look for a square graph paper, ideally small squares. This way we have some scale to work with. You can give square any scale you want, but probably 1 meter per square is a good starting point. Now you can try to draw the whole level at once, but it's really hard, and probably you will get some measure errors. The size of it's really hard to get the right size when you're drawing in such a big scale. So I recommend to start drawing area by area in small pieces, small rooms. Actually, you will be doing something similar to build the level in 3D. So this way you are sure that the areas are connected properly and the size is correct. Like I said, here is when we are doing the transition from abstract ideas to concrete level design decisions. From now on, everything needs to be there fulfilling a purpose and needs to be aligned with the art style, the constraint of the engine, and the requirement for the level to be playable. So, in my case, and it's probably the most logic approach, I started the drawing from the starting point of the level. This way, I can control the feelings that I want the player to experience from the beginning. I decided that this will be a small introductory area for the player to get used to attacking, jumping, and interacting with enemies. The learning curve needs to be slow, so I thought that would be cool for the player to start in a small and constrained area to avoid getting loose. I personally hate when the starting point is too open. So this first part is pretty linear, but it has this curvy shape that can isolate and highlight one thing at a time. First corner will show the player a single enemy, and after beating it, the player will discover that the second one is in the second corner. This approach is completely different than putting the two enemies together waiting for the player. This constrained view creates a more affordable situation for the player. And this particular shape at the starting point is there also to introduce the giant space ahead, the giant tree space, in a slowly way and teach the player to explore, turning the camera around. After this first introductory area, the player will discover the giant tree and this huge open space. This place is full of foreshadowing. In fact, the end of the level is right ahead over the root, but the player needs to travel through the whole level to open that gate. The player won't be able to see this now, but the main path of the level is planned to be a circle around the giant tree, so the player will start and end smoothly in the same place. This round way of creating a level is pretty common, and you will recognize this entangled level design in many good levels. Doing levels this way is good for the place to feel like a real place, not just a linear game level. And it's also important to create immersion and a good visual storytelling for the player. This huge space can be very intimidating at first glance, but the player will be constrained by the water. This is important to avoid overwhelming the player with option at the very start of the level. This area contains the first puzzle of the game, where the player will learn the basic mechanics, and those mechanics will be evolving through the level, and the player will need to discover new uses for them. This first part of the level is crucial. It's the moment when the player will learn most of the mechanics for the rest of the level. This area needs to be interesting, fun, and challenging enough, but at the same time, not too frustrating to keep the player attention. The second puzzle is focused in the geyser pressure mechanic. I was trying to reinforce this idea of living place and the wildness of nature. After this puzzle, you get to a safe and calm place that create that contrast that we were talking about in the previous video. In this area, the player will be led by the road, and he will be able to see some tall and inaccessible spots, with many foreshadowing paths and objects. The player will also recognize that he is close to the entrance of the level, so he will be able to guess that he's kind of near to the main objective. After a simple boss fight, you will be able to get to the white blossom that will cleanse the water of the level. I wanted this event to have a huge impact. The player will see how the level changes with his effort, and to reinforce this success, the player will also get the double jump skill. The idea of this event is to change the way the level works. So far, the level has been pretty linear, but now the waters are clean, so the player can walk over those places. And with the double jump, he can access areas that were too high for him previously. Now the level can be traveled freely, giving the player the choice of solving the last two puzzles in any order.